Welcome to Season 4 of the Vulnerable Power Show, a deep dive into the heart and soul of leadership, where we spotlight visionary leaders, spiritual entrepreneurs, innovative executives, and New Earth pioneers who have all done the inner work and soul searching to transform and step into their greater calling and mission, here to make a big impact for collective good. We will share and explore vulnerable insights and potent wisdom in our heart-centered dialogues, so you too can be equipped for the future paradigm unfolding today. Be empowered with the skills, tools, and practices so you too can do the transformative work and be the ascending leader you came here to be. Together, let's bring more heart and soul back to leadership around the world. Greetings and welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Season 4 of the Vulnerable Power Show, well underway. And today we have a very fascinating topic and a remarkable guest to talk about something that is very amorphous, very esoteric, this concept of love. What is it? And in this day and age, with so many people in our workforce and the data showing us toxicity, disengagement, and really people feeling icky, feeling miserable in the workplace, and the data is on the rise. So what is this thing called love? And then its juxtaposition of fear. And is there any place for it in our organizations, in our workplaces, especially to solve these glaring problems of these stark data points and disengagement that I'm alluding to? So I have a guest today who's all about bringing love to leadership, and has really spent a few years researching and being in the proverbial trenches. And this fellow people scientist is really passionate about the operationalization, if that's even a word, the practical applications, let's say, of love. So Renee Smith is our guest today. Welcome, Renee, and thank you for being here. And thank you for doing this work at such a pivotal time for us in society.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a joy to be with you today, and I'm really looking forward to our time and conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be a fascinating topic, especially, as I said, with so many people talking about these, let's say, soft skills and these vulnerable, touchy-feely, for a lack of a better description, topics. And your work has really spanned all these organizational fields, different industries, and I'm really fascinated to get into that. And before we get into it, I wanted to talk about something before we get into the actual research and the meat and potatoes, some of the earlier hardships that you faced as a leader that I would say equipped you with the tolerance and the capacity, for lack of a better description, to do what you're doing today. So why don't we kind of go back in time, as it were, and do a before and after, a snapshot of what was your life like in terms of organizational leadership and kind of your life journey, and then how that kind of brings us into the love and fear that you do the work with today.
Sure. I'm going to take us way back, even before work, to formative years as a young woman in high school who was probably a classic achiever, straight A student, student body president, all of that. Headed off to college with scholarships and excited and motivated in life, and then losing my way, really, I would say, losing my focus, and fell in love, married my high school sweetheart after a couple of years of college, dropped out and followed his dreams to move to Alaska and to work and live in Alaska. We lived in the Aleutian Islands. If anybody's watched Deadliest Catch, that's where we were.
Oh, wow, that's out there.
Way out there, yeah, in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, in the Aleutian Islands for 4 years, and then we lived in Homer for 4 years, and I, kind of gave up on my dreams and followed. Oh my goodness, we're gonna have a little moment there. I thought I'd silence that.
It's all good. It happens
reality.
all the time. That's why we flow. Whatever shows up, shows up. Yeah, you were saying.
There we go. Yeah. So, followed his dreams and gave up on my dreams, and made a life for ourselves and had a couple of kids, and life was good. It wasn't the life that I had expected or that I had sort of envisioned as a young woman, but I threw myself into it and homeschooled my kids and baked my bread and ground my grain, and I did all these things, and back in the day, and there was a day we were living in Homer, Alaska, and my husband had gone off to fly his plane to drop a newspaper out of his airplane to a friend's moose camp. They were out moose hunting. And I was at home with, feeding the kids dinner, unpacking groceries, and there was a knock at the door. And my little boy ran to the door, and he came running back, and he said, "Mom, there's a man with a gun at the door," and he went and hid in the pantry. I was like,
Oh, wow.
I looked out the window, and there was a police car in the driveway. And I went to the door, and the officer said, are you the wife of my husband? And I said, yes. And he said, there's been an accident. Your husband crashed his plane. He's being flown to Anchorage with a serious injury. You need to get your things. There's a plane waiting for you at the airport.
Wow.
And so I, grabbed my kids and grabbed a few things and just left everything. And he locked the house and got in the police car and then into an airplane and then into someone else's car who took us to the emergency room where my husband was lying unconscious with a traumatic brain injury and with a completely uncertain prognosis. And, that night I really, had to grapple with so many things. Had to grapple with the reality that he could die that night, and that everything was sort of tossed up in the air. Everything that we thought was certain was completely uncertain. And he did survive that first night, and in the swirl of all these experiences, that what became clear to me was like tapping into my values and into my commitment that I was going to put love at the center for my family and in this primary relationship, this commitment, and lean into this experience as part of the promises that I'd made and part of sort of what was my assignment now, to live into this moment. And so with two small kids in tow, and he was in the hospital for 2 months. He was in a coma for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And then in the hospital, recovering for 2 months until his insurance ran out. And then they sent us home. And at that point, he couldn't walk on his own and had just like relearned to swallow and feed himself and so on again. And so we went home to try to figure out how to make life work. And he eventually became more independent, but was never the same. It was really like being married to a teenager. And so instead of having 2 children, I had, sort of another human being dependent on me. But again, I felt really committed and convicted about this is the path, and just needing to live into this, and so went on to make the best that we could for quite a while, and actually had 2 more children, had 2 daughters,
Wow.
Gracia and Faith, and lived through 8 years of and in that family configuration, if you will, but eventually came to realize the harm that was being done. If anyone has experienced traumatic brain injury and someone they love, that there's well, for one thing, they can't tell you what's going to happen. They can't tell you how someone will improve or not, and there are different kinds of behaviors that can be part of a TBI. And so part of that journey was that there was a lot of anger at me. And eventually, I just felt released. I felt like I had done all that I could do, and that I felt released from that obligation, that commitment, and that I could step away and, in essence, reclaim my life and my path and my voice and sort of find my way in the world again. And so we did.
There's a lot there. This is, this is why I wanted you to bring this out when we first connected about coming on the show, because even the very childhood that you had in terms of this high achievers and all of us losing our way or giving up on our dreams, I feel like that's very common, not only for the leaders that come on the show, for a lot of us out there in the world doing way showing and being in the leading edge. And so the reason that I wanted to spotlight this, you're already diving into the compassion and patience necessary to do what we're about to talk about in terms of the research and fear and love, because these difficulties can arrive, as you're highlighting. It's a sudden thing that happens. And I can see so many applications that we could go on so many tangents right now of the applications, right? You get a teammate, family unit is a team, and the ecosystem can get toxic. Obviously, there's a correlation to those that may be joining us through you or maybe new to the show. My own brother had Parkinson's and had a degenerative illness of the brain. So it's very similar to the chaos that can arise, the emotional upheavals. And that really, I could see it in your emotions as you talk about it. It's taxing, it's tolling, and that's very directly applicable to teams, as you know, in the work you do, because you can't give up. You can't, and you highlight commitment. And then we're talking already on to what degree, at what point do you say, okay, enough, I need to take care of myself. So there's already a lot here in the space. What would you say if you were to boil it down? I know there may be a lot of multidimensionality to it. What would you say were the takeaways in terms of looking back now? Because it's more in hindsight we see these things, as you know, Renee. So
Yeah.
what would you say? How did it prepare you? Let me put it that way. If you could put some cogency to it, and what did you learn in terms of the capacity, the emotions, the compassion, patience, tolerance, you name it?
Yeah. So you're right. I mean, it took a lot of years actually to be able to kind of make sense of it. You live through it, you move and you continue on. And then at some point, time, space, maturity, whatever, gives you the ground to stand on to be able to make sense of what happened. And I started out by saying there was this moment when the accident happened of like determining I'm going to put love at the center, my family, center love for my family and for my husband. But then there was this moment of needing to shift where that became unhealthy. And there's all kinds of parallels there in work, right? We do the same and in other parts of life.
Sacrifice, you name it. Yeah.
Yeah. But there came a point where, okay, it's time now to put love at the center of my own life. Put me and love for my own life at the center. And that is worthy, that and that I'm worth that investment. That was one of the learnings that I had, that, investing in myself and valuing my own life is a worthy thing, and that I'm a good investment. And so, there was a journey of centering my own life and not selfishly, but healthfully, right? And then eventually all of that kind of coming around to then understanding the centrality of putting love at the center of really everything, of it, putting love at the center of work, and what that means. So it's been sort of the path that I've been on, is to understand the role of love in different aspects of our lives, and how we center it, and make different choices at different times about what we put at the center, if you will. I think some of the lessons that I took away from that experience, like there definitely was an aspect of taking courage. Like I really have the sense that people may hear that story and go, wow, I don't know if I could do that. Well, the reality is you can do, you have the courage available. I believe we have the courage available to us when we need it. That we talk about taking courage, that it's like right there on the shelf. We can take it off and have it when we need it, but maybe not any sooner, right? And so it's hard to imagine that in the abstract, or looking at a distance, but it's there. I really came to see how I could do hard things. And I had this motto. I mean, because this involved me going back to school. I had to finish my undergrad with 4 kids in tow, and then went to graduate school and, earned a master's degree and did a thesis and all of that with 4 kids in tow, and modeling to my children what it is to take hold of your own life and make it what you want, and reclaiming voice and place in the world. But that was doing hard things. And so my motto was, I can do anything for 2 years. Like I could get through this, 2 years to finish my undergrad, late night studies, all that stuff. Like I can do anything. And then there was like a 2-year period of sort of trying to find my way into my work, and then 2 years of grad school and so on. So there were these phases of like, okay, take a deep breath, like lean into this. And I learned that, going way back, I learned that from my own parents. I watched my dad go through dental school when I was in grade school. So my parents married at 17 and 19, and like had a really rough beginning. But leaned into that, and certainly the context of the time that they were in was also really supportive, and I had a supportive context to do what I did as well. So I don't want to make out like the
foundations were there.
Foundations were there, and supportive systems and structures were there for sure. I really found how important it was to sort of ask my own questions and give up on other people's questions and lean into the thing that was important to me. And when we're going through things, everybody's got ideas about what I should care about, what should be important, what I might do, etc. But I needed to find what mattered to me.
I love that. The internal compass. I had a teacher once tell me it's like a soccer ball. If you keep getting advice from external sources, you'll keep getting kicked every which way and never actually get to the goal or the destination of your intention.
Right.
If there were
like this is an interesting discussion about tolerance, because how would you address this notion of staying in a toxic environment longer than is necessary? So let me flip this question on its head and ask it this way. What would you say to leaders that are in a situation, this balancing act of selffulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing, as you said, love at the center for your own self-worth versus commitment and duty to the unit, to the team, to this person going through a very difficult time? What were the metrics, shall we say, or what were the elements you looked at to help other leaders? How do you assess when it's time to move on? What did you consider? What was the litmus test, for lack of a better description, for you?
Yeah. So there's, I don't know that there's any like one magic, answer to that.
Different, yeah.
In the marriage relationship, I mean, I can describe what happened, and I've looked a lot at Bob Sutton's work. He wrote the book The No Asshole Rule. And has really deep, tremendous work on looking at toxic relationships and all the permutations that takes. He's got a no asshole survival guide as well that sort of plays out the different scenarios. And so I would point to that as, people who are struggling with all of the different considerations. And I think, in essence, there are times when we feel convicted and like it's right for us to remain in a situation, to be in a situation for now, and that there are ways to cope through that situation. And then we may cross a threshold where we realize, okay, this is no longer okay. Right. It's no longer healthy for me. I need to move on. And there are strategies for doing that as well. And I don't think there's any like one way to think about that. You just really need to, I think we each need to be honest with ourselves about what's happening and the impacts on us and on others. And frankly, I think that there's an element of trusting the universe, that we are not the only answer to a problem, right? We are not the only solution in someone's life, or the only person that can be in a role on a team, or in an organization, that if we feel it's time to step away, that there will be a next solution, there will be a next person. And that's not to diminish our value or contribution, but just it's just like trusting, the universe has all these pieces, and we can be at peace with that doing the next right thing for us isn't necessarily abandoning anyone. It's just opening the door for the next right person to step forward. And so, in my marriage, the thought process actually, and I think this is telling, the thought process was a realization that my husband was saying and doing things that I felt were harmful to the children. Like he was unaware of the things that he was speaking that were harmful, and I would be constantly intervening and having to reframe and recast and like buffer them, because he just wasn't aware, and it wasn't intentionally being cruel or anything, but it was harmful, and there was all this dissonance, and all this dissonance, and so I finally came to realize I just like can't live in that distance anymore, and I need to protect my children from that on a day-to-day basis. They don't need to be subjected to that day-to-day. They still need a relationship with him, but it's a different thing to be kind of, immersed in that. And so my initial motivation was I need to leave for my kids. But the truth was I needed to leave for me too. And it just took, it took a while. I mean, as a mom, you think about my children first, but it was also true that thinking about me and my own well-being was also thinking about the well-being of my children. So it's kind of a package deal.
We see that.
Yeah.
We see that in nature a lot too. If you ever watch these nature documentaries, and it's very interesting because we think it's unnatural to do that as a mother. And it's not actually, because it's the proverbial oxygen mask concept that everybody uses as a proverbial cliche. So this is fascinating for me because, here, the work that I used to do full time, I used to call it business divorces, and I specialized in toxic, high stakes litigation. And so it's fascinating to me because I'm listening to you, what's dropping in is going back to essentially mediating these types of situations where one person has gone very egregious and they're causing harm to the kid, which is the baby, the business that they've co-created together. In this instance, you have actual kids, when the family unit is the other aspect of it. So it's fascinating to me because it sounds like that's what you were doing. You were like, how do I salvage this without, hurting my co-founder, let's say, and then also making sure that the ecosystem stays intact to the extent. So there's a lot going on there, and it's very difficult because, like you're alluding to, there's no right or wrong.
Right.
It's a proverbial, it depends, as us lawyers love to say. And there's so many lessons that you're already bringing forward that I would say prepared you before you even knew it for doing this type of work. And I love how you talk about the universe, because oftentimes we forget that there's resources that may seem esoteric, for a lack of a better description, and this proverbial algorithm that we call the universe, it will find a way to get these pieces into place. Only we need to step back to allow that. It's a proverbial 80-20 rule, as some people say in Vistage and some of these other executive spaces. You hear, how much leadership should you put in? How much should you step back to create an avenue for other things to come in and take care of it? So I love how you're saying all this. So how did this then guide you forward? Obviously, we're looking at it in hindsight, in retrospect. So how did you then, 2 years started to add up and jump into this notion of the core concept for today, this concept of eliminating fear from the workplace? You know, this topic that was present in your family unit, right? From the very incident in Alaska.
Right. You know, so I think one of the things, other thing I want to mention, a last takeaway that does maybe a bridge to this, there, in all of this, like rediscovering, reclaiming my life, finding my voice, finding, you know, my passion, where I wanted to, you know, the questions that I was interested in engaging and so on. There was a moment of having to declare myself, and as it, you know, in a new truth about myself. And this, you know, people talk about imposter syndrome and the struggle that can be, and I think we all struggle with that, and it, you know, it comes up still, for sure. And there's this moment of that I've had to face when it was like, oh, like, here we are. I could speak into this moment. And I was actually working in my dad's dental practice as a, you know, working in the front desk, in the front office, and helping to, you know, just as part of earning money and going through school and whatnot.
Oh, wow.
And there was a patient that came in, and she was filling out her health history form, and she was describing how she was the executive director of this organization. And, you know, in looking at her health history, I asked her about that, and she started to tell me all about the place that they were in as an organization, and the strategic planning that they needed to do, and the development they needed to do of the board. And she's telling me all these things. She has really, like, why on earth she would tell that to the admin assistant in the dental office, right?
You got a trustworthy face. You're like me. People can tell you things. I can already tell.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, oh, I know exactly what she's talking about. Like, this is my training, and I'd already begun to practice, you know. So there's these parallel paths that we are sometimes on as we're moving out of one thing and into another. And I looked at her and I said, I can help you with that. And it was that self-declaration that led to a relationship with that organization, with some of, you know, some early meaningful consulting work, exposure to a whole board of directors that led to other consulting work, and, you know, impacts to that organization. And then, you know, ripples of work that went on for years. But it happened because I declared myself.
I love that. Yeah, we have an episode this season with Mark O'Brien, a fellow, you know, member of Brian Kelly and Humans First and all that stuff, which is how we met. And so I love this because the way you worded it, I love that. I declare myself, because God knows it's difficult to do that. I've had to do that the last few years, reinventing myself, getting more into, let's say, the mystic and spiritual work as it applies to the business arena. So that is scary, is it not? I mean, how did you feel sitting there? I mean, because you, right now, you say it so calmly, so confidently. Back then, for anybody listening, because I know early on, I either had two ways of going about it, either hypercompensating or hypercompensating. Either I was too loud in trying to declare myself, or too mousy and unsure. And you touched on imposter syndrome, especially when we've been one way or this parallel paths of careers. What did it feel like to do that? I mean, if you were to go back and put yourself in that mindset and emotional landscape, did you have any reservations? If not, that's okay too. I mean, you may be a unique leader.
I mean, I think that I remember that sense of, like, you know, the pressure on your chest, and I have a physical sensation that comes to me when I know I'm supposed to, like, I've got something to say.
What is that? How would you describe your gut instinct, your knowing?
It's like an energy that comes and drops down into my chest, and maybe a little tightening, and a little bit of, it's like elevated adrenaline, I'm sure. Like, oh, this is one of those things. And when that happens, like I can't not do it.
So you've actually
And so-
noticed your cues, and your body intelligence and your interoception seems very heightened as a leader.
yeah,
What you're
that,
speaking
that
to.
yeah, that's I think just built part of who I am, I guess. I'm not sure where it came from, but there it is. And so yeah, so I just spoke it and then offered that we could have a conversation about that to explore that further. So it was pretty simple but profound. Like and you know, those moments can like slip right by too. But it was just like so stark in that my awareness of this right now, this it's a thing.
You're paying
So
attention.
yeah, I spoke into that. And the thing is, like, if I hadn't said that, nobody else is going to declare myself for me, you know.
Bingo.
We have
Bingo.
to do it for ourselves. So, and when we do, whew, that feels awesome. And it in itself, that declaration is empowering. So
You're
that, like I
highlighting
said,
You're
yeah, go
highlighting
ahead.
so
Sorry.
much already because I would use the word intuitive. You're very intuitive, and it sounds like you're, heart math, all these neuroscientists, all these neurobiologists now are stumbling on the last decade or two on this research. Oh, we have these things that ancient mystics used to talk about, and we're converging on holistic understandings of the human apparatus or human beingness. Sounds like you've always been intuitive. You follow your gut, you follow your heart, you kind of know what it is. So that's remarkable. Were you always this way, or did your family encourage it? I mean, again,
Yeah.
being a people scientist, coming from an organizational background, I would say people have to learn this. This is the new way.
I think so. I mean, I think that I grew up in a really supportive environment. And so there was some, confidence in that that came from that. But I also think that as I moved through my undergrad finally and through graduate school, I did have a sense of like, dang, I've really like missed like a little sense of regret, like, what if I had done this sooner? What if I had paid attention? What if I hadn't left myself aside? And coming clear that like I am not going to miss opportunities as they come forward. Like I just don't want to hesitate. And I had actually a profound experience with that. Like I was in a learning session in graduate school with Peter Block.
Okay.
For those who know Peter Block, who wrote Flawless Consulting and a whole bunch of other books, and leader in the field of OD, and he did this exercise with us where he said, we're all kind of sitting around the room, and he said, so I need 4 volunteers, and so 4 people volunteered and came up, and then he said, okay, now turn to 2 other people next to you and talk about what just happened and what you did and why you did it and how this is like what you always do. Which is true. Like, because did I volunteer? No, because I hesitated, like, I wonder what, volunteer for what? Like, and the people who volunteered were like, what? And he asked them, I guess, why did you volunteer? It's like, I want to be in the action. I want to, I'm curious. I'm excited I don't need to know what it is. Like, I'm ready to go. And I thought, dang, this is what I do, right? I hesitate. And by hesitating and being like not ready to just like step forward, you miss the fun sometimes. And like, so getting out of my head, getting into my intention had been like, I'd really had a learning moment in that session with Peter in grad school. And so, flash forward to this moment when I'm like declaring myself and I can help you with that. That is like seizing that moment. It's like not hesitating, not being, not wanting to miss. And frankly, what harm could come, right? There's no harm that could come from that. We have a conversation. She says, no, but she didn't. She said, awesome, I need the help. And on it went. So
it's an interesting reframe.
That became the bridge into my career, really. It bridged me into the work that I did at the University of Washington for several years as an organization development manager. And then that led to my work in state government, in organization development for a state agency and doing leading continuous improvement work, and which was really, ultimately, it was about leading a culture change in state government, and being part of a team of people who were doing that. And it was there that I kind of had this epiphany about love and fear. So
it's interesting. We're going to dive into that in a second. I mean, it's very fascinating because I would say I was a hesitator. Because I definitely, in terms of my own experience, I didn't have the capacity to sit with my brother. That was one of my proverbial regrets. That I wasn't with him the last few months of his life because I couldn't handle the toxicity, the ups and downs, the erraticness. There's a lot to it. And I would say that many of us type A, like high achievers, let's say, in the race that type A, we miss out. And there is this notion of let's say being in our head, missing the subtle cues, missing the let's say the hints or the moments of, oh, I should carpe diem this, I should seize this, why not, what if. And there has been a reframe for me, and it was a huge one a few years ago, that goes from what if this doesn't work to what if it does work, which a lot of this is the inner work that I feel like you're highlighting, that's necessary not only to declare ourselves and step in to, let's say, our flow and what we're inspired to bring forth in terms of our calling. It's also important because it brings us that fulfillment and that satisfaction, which I think is causing all the problems that we're seeing in society these days.
Well, and I think what you're tapping into is it's moving away from perfection and redefining, you know, what was the phrase you just used? What is the right thing? Or you know, we want to seize this moment and do the right thing. Well, or have the right experience. Well, what is that? Like let's just be in this moment and find out what next. What there isn't sort of the perfect thing that can happen or that should happen. There is just the next thing that happens, and that can all be good, instead of it having, if I do this, will I do it right? If I volunteer and raise my hand and step forward, will I be embarrassed? Will I make a mistake? Well, maybe there's no mistakes. Maybe there's just that next experience.
Everything is, one man's coincidence is another's fate, depending on how you look at everything is perspective. So there is this question that I have, because it is, for me, I didn't have, obviously I was younger and I didn't have the embodiment, the presence, because a lot of what we're dancing around is not being disassociated, being fully immersed. So would you say you developed that? Because I think I've seen research on this. Those that are survivors of traumatic experiences or traumatic households, they tend to have more, it's a byproduct of the hypervigilance. They tend to be more embodied or present. It's not a healthy result. It's that there's a byproduct there. It's a symptom, let's say, of the trauma. Would you say that you developed this because you had to be so all hands on deck with the family stuff going on? Or because a lot of what you're talking about, I'm highlighting intuition and all this, you're also talking very as if you're embodied, right? At the dentist's office, you weren't in your head, you weren't absent, you were immersed. So you got the cues, as you talked about, your body intelligence gave you the hunches, and you went, oh, now I missed a lot of those because I was so trauma ridden, and so much of the inner work we talk about on the show the last 3-4 seasons. So would you say that was a byproduct of, again, your upbringing? Was it the family circumstances? What made you so present? Because this is something that I touch upon this season in a solo episode, embodiment. What does it mean to be an embodied leader and how vital it is these days?
I would say that the experience, so having had a stable, healthy childhood and being confident and, having a low ACEs score, frankly, as a young person.
Oh, okay.
But then coming into really traumatic experiences as a young adult or a young woman in my 20s, as I've described, but not really understanding at the time that was traumatic and how it played out. That there was definitely developing muscle and emotional capacity that I, didn't, when you're doing it, you're not necessarily aware, oh, I'm developing a muscle and capacity, but you are, right? And compassion, and experiencing compassion from other people who, who meet you in those moments, and learning what that's like and how valuable that is, and realizing, oh, I can and will in my life now meet other people in that way. That awareness grows. And I would say that over the years, it took a while, but that trauma played out later. It was probably maybe 14 years or something later, where my body said, okay, we've been carrying this long enough. You're going to get sick now, and you're going to have to work this through. And so there was a whole process of getting, having certain kinds of physiological reactions that were really debilitating and grew in intensity for a while, and that I had to come to terms with, and eventually had to process as unresolved grief. I was carrying grief in my body and couldn't really go on until I had acknowledged that, dealt with that, processed that. And then when I did, things were better. That it was like, okay, that's I don't get sick like that anymore. But having that sense, though, there's some kind of sensibility that's built, some awareness and sensitivity to just my own physiology and the sensing that my body is telling me, that messages that my body's sending.
It's beautiful
through those channels. So,
well, I mean, there's so much science now. I mean, again, leaders, what's the last thing you want to do? Slow down and unpack and process things that you carried. And you even touched on something that's very remarkable. You glossed over it for those that don't know: ACE score, adverse childhood experiences. I mean, my mom says this all the time. We talk about it on the show, especially this season. They didn't have this not even 20, 30 years ago. I mean, Peter Siegel's work, the work that Gabor Mate, some of these peers out there,
right.
It's the last 20 years. And my mother says, we didn't know these things back then, our generation, right? So you're touching on books like Our Body Keeps Score. And what's fascinating, because you're a scientist and I have really a hardcore science background. Most people don't know that about me. Garbage into a system, garbage out of a system, right? I mean, it's going to be present when we talk about fear in a workplace, right? Because once this energy, this vibration enters in grief, in your instance, grief, my instance, grief, resentment, all sorts of things I was housing. And if you don't do something about it, as you're touching upon, whether it be your biological ecosystem or the ecosystems we're going to talk about in workplaces and private or public sector, you got to do something with it. And I love how you're even touching on energy work. I mean, you don't have to believe in the metaphysical. Once you did it, you were no longer in dis-ease. You even said it, you never got sick again. You didn't have to be in dissonance. You didn't have to be desensitized. You didn't have to be in dis-ease. These are all choices, and you made these very wise choices, it sounds like. So I love how you're unpacking it that way. It's awesome.
Thank you. I feel fortunate to have been led along this path. I don't take credit for brilliance on all this. It's just
it helps
right?
that you're in Seattle and you're like being raised in Los Angeles. They tend to have I saw this in my, let's say, last few years, taking a sabbatical and really traveling the world and seeing other perspectives more in the proverbial trenches, that we really are fortunate. Some of the parts of America, we have exposure to progressive understandings, progressive research. And I would say, like, Los Angeles is the mecca of spiritual sciences and trauma-informed holistic healing. I would say Seattle and the Northwest is like that as well. I would say some of it is the ability and the grace that we had and the luck we had, the fortune, as you said, to be in these environments, to be exposed to some of these teachings or some of these, because they don't have it all over the world. I would say it's spreading now. What you're even doing as you're traveling, what we're going to start unpacking this notion of eliminating fear and shifting to love in workplaces and leadership. So dis-ease, when did that happen, real quick, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the research, this unpacking the grief work and the biophysical? When was this in all of your journey?
So if the plane crash happened when I was 27 in 1990, yeah, I was going to claim a really young age right now. The plane crash happened in 1992.
Oh, wow.
I was 27, so I'm 58 now. And the kind of unpacking things and coming to terms and healing from that happened in probably 2010.
Wow. 20 years later.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And I mean, there were, layers unfolding. I went back to, I stayed married until 2000, went back to school in 2000 to 2005. And so it's a, unpacking more and more and unfolding. I like the thinking about unfolding something and laying it out and, discovering what's kind of folded into the layers of our lives. Right. And so eventually a readiness, though. And again, that really prepared me well for when I had this conversation when I was working at the Department of Enterprise Services with a senior leader, Chris Liu, executive of our organization, about the culture work we were doing.
Okay.
And I asked him, so, okay, Chris, what do you think is the most important job of a leader in this work? And I could put like a signpost in the ground at this moment. I can remember where we were sitting and what was happening and the whole conversation. because he immediately replied to eliminate fear from the workplace. That was just like music to my ears. I was such a happy camper when I heard him say that. Like, yes, okay, I know I'm in the right place, doing the right work with the right people. That it resonated, of course. It aligned with my values, and made complete sense. And it was like, okay, that's true, but it's also only half the story. And so, the accompanying question that I sat with and muddled and pondered, and as I began to like really explore and think about how fear plays out specifically, what happens in our neurophysiology when we're afraid and so on, and how that ripples into behaviors and experience and so on. Then the question became, okay, if we're decreasing fear, what's taking fear's place? Essentially, what's the opposite of fear? And I came to believe that it's love. And got super clear for myself about that, and then said that out loud in a really public place. Now, remind you, I was working in government, and I was in this huge conference in a breakout session with 400 people, and said that out loud. And I was with Chris actually, and he was saying it's a leader's job to eliminate fear, and I was wrapping it up by saying, yeah, and by the way, when we do that, we replace it with love. And 400 people were like, what did she just say? I mean, it was just like dead silence. And I made a joke and broke the tension and said, hey, it got pretty quiet in here, but, essentially told people we love our work, and we love the people we work with, and we love the people we serve. And we want to know that we belong and that we matter and that we can contribute. And when we have that sense of being essentially loved, we can give and do and be our very best. And there was spontaneous applause in the room. Of 400 government workers were like, yes. And for weeks later, people were stopping me and saying, hey, I was there when you said that. Keep saying that. And I thought, okay. I had come to believe this to be true, but I didn't know how people would respond, And I don't know that 20 years ago people would have responded that way, but at that moment in time, which was in 2015, that was the response. And that set me on a quest to really lean in, to create a research project for myself as a social scientist, to design a research project and to begin to interview people and collect data, qualitative data through stories on people's experiences of being afraid at work and their experiences of being loved at work.
Which we're in that proverbial, the nuts and bolts of today's exploration. I love this because when you first told me this, yeah. I said to you, wow, this is fascinating, because from a more mystical energy sciences alchemy perspective, when you remove an energy, nobody really thinks this. You need to replace it, right? So everybody's like, let's get rid of toxicity. Well, and it makes sense, right? Because you will have an empty space. Even if you think in terms of entropy, a container, a closed universe, you need to fill it with something. And there's even a, really potent staying in the spiritual community that the heart can have only one master. What do you choose, fear or love? And they're really, let's say, converse vibrations or patterns, as we're going to unpack with your research today. So I love that you stumbled upon that, let's say, or you downloaded that and you pieced that together, because I would say that's really, for me, I was like, oh, well, I'll be, you don't say. One quick question, which is going to kind of, it may be a spoiler alert. As you talked about dis-ease, as you talked about having to do, let's say, look at the stuff you had stored and how it has different elements, is it an inevitability that leaders that lead fearful environments, that they need to do this type of work? In other words, are fearful workplaces run by dis-eased leaders? I'm curious. I know we're jumping ahead. Since you brought up because I see everything as an extension of the leader, whether it be a founder, one person. So I see this as an extension of their morphogenic field, their coherent state, and their incoherence. So they're going to create something, and then the people that join, they're going to all go around that. So would you say, I'm curious, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit since you brought up diseased. How does that land for you? Yeah.
So I would say that I can't speak to that from my research. My research didn't explore that question. But if I step back and think about, do leaders who are creating fearful environments, are they holding fear and dis-ease themselves? That's logical, right? It's just on its face logical. So I can't, like I say, I can't.
Yeah, I know it's not in your research. I'm shooting off the cuff, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm curious from what you see, and I like how you're saying it. It makes sense. I could see how there would be a correlation. It sounds like what you're saying.
And I guess the compassion that I want to offer is that frankly, I think we're all, holding dis-ease. And, in our journey, I believe that our journey as humans is about healing from those elements, those experiences, whatever that is for us, each being different and unique and whatever our life journey has been. And turning toward how do we put love in every facet of our life? How do we welcome love? How do we rekindle love? How do we find love, rediscover it, whatever the verb is that you want to use? There's a lot of different permutations of that. But how do we center love in every aspect of our lives and of our world? That is our human work.
Mm.
And we do lots of other things. And that love can manifest, for every person in a different way, and needs to. Like, we've got lots of different, needs that need to be solved, and areas of attention, and there's plenty for everyone to do. We don't all have the same question. We don't all have the same kind of like primary focus. But if we were each, leaning into the responsibility to learn and discover and practice putting love at the center of our community, of our neighborhood, of our school, of our work relationships, our working in our operations, of our families, of every interaction, if we were really centering love, this would be a lot different place, right? And that is the frame, that is the essential charge that I want to bring, that we want to, and particularly related to work. I will feel like we have made it a success if it is assumed that, like, each of us knows that when we go to work, when we take on a new job, when someone launches into a career, that they're given, and aware of the responsibility to now think every day and to work every week and in every way to center love in the work that they're doing. That's the goal. That it's assumed that that's what we should all be doing.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate before you unpack the research and what it showed us and the patterns and some of the nuts and bolts. You're in front of an audience saying this. You're a way shower. You're about to bring a new, let's say, thesis out, because you essentially verbalized my thesis. I believe we have a trauma epidemic, and it's because we have to do this inner work, which you said, this human work. And I think that's what we're seeing in the ecosystems around the world. So when you bring something like this out, something novel, right, you have to have the courage, the instinct kicks in, you say it. There's a range of responses that you receive, right? So I'm curious, because as you say, we have a responsibility. I'm going to play devil's advocate. What? How dare you? Love, responsibility, job duties? Huh? What kind of responses did you early on receive before you start to unpack the research for us? Because I see this is also another pattern that us leaders face. And it's helpful to see what you faced and how you overcame it. So what types of ranges of responses did you receive, both, let's say, in the audience? Obviously, you said some of them clapped. A lot of them kept saying, come. That's the positive side. Did you have anything on the converse? Were there any naysayers? If so, what does it look like? What did it look like in terms of when you first brought this forward, when you first were like, this is the thesis. This is what I think. Yeah.
So there's kind of three general responses. One is, what are you talking about? Come on, what a bunch of fill in the blank. Skepticism. And even in that, there's variations on that skepticism, like, I'm sorry, I've been hurt too many times. This isn't possible. Or, hey, I've been acculturated that I can't go there, so don't even approach me with that. Or I just don't believe that, there can be that. Another response is, oh, really? I'm okay. I don't know. Like, I'm a little confused. I'm thinking, love is too soft. Love is too lenient. Love is too permissive. Like, this doesn't make sense to me.
Like, it does not compute.
This could not work. There's no accountability. Right?
Interesting.
And then the third, big group of responses is, yes, finally, someone is saying what I have been living and doing all along, what I've believed all along. Thank you. And so there is that range of responses initially. And if I just sort of introduce the topic without taking people through the business case, which, I make the business case. And usually I'm not so sort of on the spiritual side, or that we're getting to be in a space today that I don't often stand in personally, but not overtly. because I'm, really
The
am mindful.
modulation of how you bring it forward, so to
Right.
speak. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're speaking to that.
Mindful of squarely placing this in the business case. And so if I haven't gotten to do that and I just sort of introduce the topic, I will get any number of responses, any of those versions, and all of the different nuances of those.
I love the
And
first
fine,
one.
right?
I love the
That's
first one,
fine.
the skepticism based on past experiences. I remember talking to a colleague. I may have mentioned this to you when we initially spoke about coming on the show. He was actually full on OD, McKinsey, works with the University of Southern California leadership, Mary Campbell, I believe, Dr. Mary Campbell. And I first said to him when I was doing my sabbatical and thinking, I want to go into the direction of bringing fully what I was doing as a lawyer, healing in the bit. And he said to me, based on his old experiences, oh my God. And it does make me laugh because it takes us to that conversation we had a few minutes ago. It's their own internal stuff that's coming out. And it's up to us if we look to ourselves versus it sounds like, going back to what you said initially, you started to look at your own inner voice and your inner guidance. And I love how you're talking about it in a very business way, because yes, we have to modulate it. Humanity is not ready for full-on holistic, and there needs to be some leaders need to hear it in a more pragmatic, in a more grounded way. So that takes us into the research. So here you are doing this work. You've overcome your own internal resistances. So what did your research, where did it take you? Let's start diving in terms of the ahas that you saw, the patterns, the elements. What is love?
Yeah. So, and I'll actually start with, what is fear? Coming to understand the basics of the human response to a threat, whether it's a psychological threat or a physical threat, that we have, a threat response, or a threat triggers a fear response, fight, flight, freeze, appease, and there's other aspects of that fear response. But essentially, we are triggered when we are threatened to protect ourselves. And that creates a cascade of physiological responses, and it creates behavioral responses as well. And so, palms sweat, pupils dilate, appetite suppressed, heart races. We're, jumpy and ready to protect ourselves, and we pull back, right? We withhold when we're talking about how that might manifest in the workplace. We might see people get agitated and angry and in a kind of fight response. We might see people not show up to a meeting, or take a day off, or quit the job and go to work somewhere else because this place is just too dang scary. And I'm tired of feeling this way. We might see people freeze up when they're in a threat condition at work, and just like not be able to respond until the threat passes, and then have to process all of that. We might see people just figure out exactly what the team and the leader want. What's the right answer? Whether I think it's the right answer or not, whether this is my opinion, or this is what I know, or this is the data that I have, I'm not going to tell you, because I found out last time that when I spoke those things, that was not well received. I was told to stay in my lane, or why'd you give voice to that? And I took the risk, and I found out that the risk wasn't worth taking. So we're really talking about psychological safety, right? Is this group a safe place to take interpersonal risks? And if I have learned that it's not, then I'm going to pull back. I'm going to minimize myself. I'm going to withhold. I'm going to be cautious. I'm not going to exert, and I may leave, either leave in place or actually leave. And then we have turnover and impacts to performance and all of the kinds of challenges. So fear plays out in our workplaces again and again and again like that. And when people, when leaders and organizations sort of structurally are leveraging fear and thinking that they're going to motivate with fear, we are continually triggering people to be in that threat and fear condition, and to not be able to be their best. And so when I ask people about these stories, experiences of when they felt afraid, a few people, or a certain segment of people, would tell stories about times where they faced a performance challenge, and were really nervous, and then move through that and have the fear subside. And as long as that challenge wasn't a circumstance where they were being set up to fail, that was actually a good kind of fear. That's the kind of fear where we're stepping up and meeting the moment and learning and growing. So I want to acknowledge that, but set that aside, because that's not toxic. These other kinds of fears are toxic. The kinds of toxic stories that people told me about, there were 5 kinds. One is, I don't know how to be successful after this change. And so something, the work is going along, everything's great, and then something changes and people are not guided in what it looks like to be successful now.
Hmm.
And that, it's difficult. I mean, it threatens our sense of, if I don't know how to be successful, am I going to do the wrong thing? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be able to feed my family? We get primal really fast. There's this little chain
Well, we're
of,
raised rule-based too. It makes sense. Societally, conditioned wise, we're used to tell me what to do. So then you change the proverbial, what do they call it in football? You keep changing the flag post or whatever it's called, and you don't know, is this what you want of me? So keep going. Yeah. That
yeah.
first
So
makes sense.
that's one of the fear stories. Another is that I was betrayed. So either being betrayed in a warm personal relationship in the workplace that goes sour, or being betrayed when a leader betrays their integrity and acts unethically, and the fear of getting pulled into that. So different kinds of betrayal, but both leading to a lot of stress and anxiety, physical illness, low energy, and just time away from the work, trying to navigate the turbulence. A third kind of fear story is being publicly shamed and humiliated.
Oh, wow.
Super, super harmful. People talked about being called out in meetings and being yelled at and belittled and backstabbed and picked apart, and being
Can't
incredibly
imagine
guarded
that.
and stressed. It happens so often.
Really? It still blows my mind that that's out there. I mean, that's why I guess our world is in such disarray right now. We have these talks anyways.
Right.
Wow. I'm shocked hearing this. Keep going.
And when people experience this, they also reported physiological impacts that tie back to the threat triggers a fear response, and then there's this chronic impacts to our health when we're in a chronic fear condition. And so people reported weight gain and eczema and stomach ailments and insomnia and impacts to diabetes and depression and hearing loss.
Well, yeah, your people are already full, and all you're doing in these workings. I mean, as you're unpacking this, my brain's going, I mean, that makes sense. Then you're overwhelming them even more, and there's breaking points happening, and then you have all these manifestations of chronic distress and chronic disease as you're listing, and you're only on the third: public shaming and embarrassment.
Right. Not being supported in a personal crisis is the next one.
That's the fourth one. Okay.
Yeah. So life happens and I'm told to leave home at home and work at work and just do my job. And I don't want to know about your personal circumstances.
Just business. Suck it up.
Yeah. And what I discovered is that, we have a real fear that if we open the door a crack to let someone's personal stuff in, that it's going to gush in and dump all over the place and we're not going to be able to get anything done. But what I found is that people who are in these circumstances actually don't want to be that messy person. Generally, there's a lot of concern about, I don't want to dump it all over, but I do need to know that there's compassion for what I'm in the middle of, and that, many people, not everybody wants to share, but those who would find support in that want to be understood, want to have it understood, like I need to, come in a little late or leave a little early, or if I just show up and I'm not myself, that there is understanding for what they're going through and that we can hold space for each other. And so that was another fear that is, all too common. And then the last was I experienced harassment and discrimination. And so, being ignored and overlooked and dismissed and misunderstood and mischaracterized and labeled and pigeonholed and even threatened and assaulted.
Wow.
And just the terrible impacts that harassment and discrimination have on human beings.
Now, do you see this as a spectrum in terms of well, let me ask you, backing up, let me digress. Is this the patterns that you alluded to when you said these are the patterns of fear? Or would you say these are the 5 patterns that they chose up as?
These are the 6 themes if we include the one that is not toxic. But yeah, these are the themes and the fear stories in the research that I have done. 75 formal interviews and actually hundreds of workshops, hundreds of people in workshops, and around in I think in 10 countries now. And so these are the patterns that have emerged so far. There may be others, but certainly this has been comprehensive enough, as I've worked with people in groups and all kinds of organizations around the world. These are the stories that continue to emerge and that are familiar. I've only really had one person say, I've never experienced fear. Only
Were they an
one.
entrepreneur or?
They were a prominent CEO who came in from a pretty privileged space, a white man CEO in a privileged role.
Well, I could see that may be possible. You would have to have very few stimuli your whole upbringing. I mean, because we're talking now, I mean, your work dovetails social sciences, psychology, organizational sciences, statistics, etc. So I mean, we're going back to basic neuroscience and psychology and conditioning because I mean, that sounds like a human that is an outlier, way outlier, because how many people don't ever have stress, don't ever have a stimulus to trigger these fear responses that are human, that are nervous system oriented.
Right. Or have enough confidence and like structural support and enough, I don't even know what to call it, but enough
something
so that whatever happens, that they don't experience it as fear, right? It's very unusual.
Let me not pay. Yeah. Let me not pay. I'm not judging. Let me ask again, I'd love to ask these questions that drop in because of the way my brain thinks and processes. Would you say that's hubris? Would you say, and I know you're not saying it as a scientist, more informally, would you say, is that accurate? In other words, is that person BSing, fluffing it a little? Is that possible even? I can't.
No, I don't think it was BSing. I think it was just that person's worldview and the way that they experienced the world. So I think
their schemata was set up in such a way that maybe they'd even convince. I see it. I posit that they've convinced themselves they've never really.
It's not for me to judge, but
I hear
but it was
you.
fascinating. So for all the rest of us, way too familiar. Everything that I just described, way too familiar. And I guess it too, I would say, as and I don't mean to laugh, but it's just like the truth is that as we've shared, as I've just spoken at, and people are listening, like that's washing over people. And even hearing that triggers those areas in our brain, and we're empathetic. And so I would just encourage, like, take a deep breath and shake it off if as you're listening that reminds you of something, or you're just like empathetically feeling that. Move a little, let it flow through your body and out, because we'll talk about love too, and that will be a balm.
I love that. No, that's good mindfulness.
Important.
I like that. I like that you're presencing that because, I mean, some people may have had really heinous experiences that this is triggering them or bringing that up for them. So I appreciate that.
What I have found is that just the naming of them, while it can be hard sometimes, depending on what's present to someone in this very moment too, that there also is a certain kind of comfort in realizing it's not just me, right? Because when we are that person, when we are in the crosshairs of those experiences, it can, it's like any kind of abuse essentially, or bullying. It's like, what's wrong with me? Well, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. This that isn't deserved. It's not the way to live and work. It's not the way to team. It's not the way to lead. And we have a lot of conditioning in the society that leads people to think that they need to leverage fear instead of loving behaviors. So I would just offer that.
I love that. There's also an aspect of normalizing these conversations.
Yes.
And that's what I think is important. And one of the reasons that I do the show the way that I do. And I loved something you said earlier about vulnerability and the fear that we have as leaders to open that door because of what will come out. Because that colleague that I talked about earlier, he was looking at it from an HR perspective. And he was saying, look, I mean, I can imagine HR people listening cringing because, once you get into certain, let's say, discussion points, avenues, then you have legal liability and different things that come up that I can appreciate. I have an Esquire. I get that. At the same time, I feel like we're hiding behind these things as excuses. And there's a fine line between doing vulnerability in a healthy way that doesn't cross the line or create any of these, let's say, wrinkles. For lack of a better description.
There's a lot of nuance. I'll come back to the word nuance again. There's a lot of nuance to all this. And, this is not like black and white, super simple, this is deep stuff. And, and it does take us leaning in, but the thing that is not as visible. Okay. So there's a risk in naming these things or into treading into certain territory.
Yeah.
But what is not acknowledged is the risk of not.
Boom.
Is the risk of not
Boom.
acknowledging humanity, of not being able to hold space for people, of not developing the muscle and the emotional capacity and the structural supports to meet people where they're at. that is what is costing us. And we have the wrong lens.
Bravo. That's my thesis. I would say that at what cost have we done this? Because if the data is any indicator, we're going in the wrong direction by hiding and sweeping under the rug and going in the direction of no, let's grin and bear it. Let's pretend it didn't happen, so to speak. The numbing, the ignoring, the bypassing of it is no longer going to work. I don't sense a way forward for us and I'm not talking humanity as a personal, I mean in the business landscape. Most of the people, and we'll get into this because you're going to ask me in our fun experiential portion, you said I want to talk to you about law, and I can talk all day about law and love and fear. So where do you see then the opposite? So you did this on fear, and now what's the converse? What are loving patterns, or what are the elements of love? How does that look like after your research?
Yeah. So when I, similarly asked people for their stories of times when they felt loved at work, and I think before sharing the stories, I would say that it's helpful to provide a little bit of a frame about what do I mean by love. And, in talking to people about love, we think about love as both an action and a feeling. So yes, it's something that we do, and it is something that we experience as a feeling as human beings. That it can have, elements of interpersonal affection, of human kindness, of acceptance and belonging, perhaps of self-sacrifice, but also, as someone pointed out today in a group that I was working with, of not only self-sacrifice, but of self-care too, right? So there's all of these different components to love and behaviors associated with love. A friend and colleague, Moshe Engelberg, wrote the book, The Amare Wave. Amare being another word for love.
Moshe. Oh, interesting.
You need to know Moshe. And he defines love as energy that uplifts and connects. And I love that. I think that's spot on. And again, back to nuance, I would say, one of my team members, Lily, pointed out that you can take, that definition that love should be uplifting and connecting. You can take that at a very certain surface kind of way. And her reaction was, well, it's not, people don't always want to be like uplifted, like cheerfully, in sort of positivist kind of way. Sometimes meeting people and uplifting people is meeting them where they're at. And, and so there can't be assumptions about what it means to uplift and connect. It's about, me learning about you and where you're at.
Well, you're touching on something I learned, sorry to interject, toxic positivity in a way, right? Where you're kind of like, and it's almost like manic, because it's devoid of humanity. And I love Moshe's definition, because I would say, the scientific explanation of it. It's an energy of a higher vibrational nature that literally lifts your state of being up.
Yes.
I like that.
And then if we think about that in the converse, so that it would make sense then if we think about fear as the energy that oppresses and divides, right?
Down.
So it's very clarifying, I find. I think I like to think about love too on the spectrum, if you will, or ways that love manifests in our life on like our spectrum of human experience. So when I talked, when I say love and ask you about loving experiences in your life, it's natural to go to your closest people. Your partner, if you have one, or spouse, your children, if you have them, your brothers, sisters, parents, all that, your family, or your closest friends, maybe your chosen family. And so that's like a natural place our brain automatically goes. And we kind of know what love looks like in that sphere of our lives. But then if you go to the very opposite end of the spectrum, and you are walking down the street, in your neighborhood or in a city, maybe in somewhere where, you're visiting another city, somewhere where you don't know anyone, walking down the street and you're, trip and fall and your bag dumps all over the place. And some stranger stops to help you up and help you gather your things and put you back together and make sure that you're not hurt, and then sends you on your way. And you never see that person again. They're gone, right? But there was love there between that perfect stranger whom you will never see again. And so my deep belief is that in that, those two different ends of the spectrum are people and then perfect strangers. If there can be love in both of those places, there also can and needs to be love in all of the other spheres of our lives. So in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our, when we're out in the world, and in our work. in all of the different spaces where we live. That love, there are versions of love that belong in every one of those spaces. My work is about bringing that love into the workplace. And so when I ask people, tell me a story about a time when you felt loved at work. Some people will use the word love and say, well, I felt loved when this happened, and they'll tell a story. Most people, though, say, well, I never thought about it as love before, but now that you mentioned it, and they will tell a story about a time when they felt respect or trust or kindness or empathy and compassion or inclusion and belonging or courage or challenge or appreciation. And the three kinds of love stories that I will tell you all have different nuances, those different behaviors of manifest in these stories. And what people were really providing is the operational definition of what love looks like in a professional setting. And no, it's not romance. And let's be clear, it's not sexual. And the idea that it would, like that now
that's all we're used to.
That's harassment and discrimination, right? Let's not go there.
That's all we're used to as a society. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's all romantic, sex, or love. That's it. That's all. So I love this. Thank you for starting with that preface, because it's so much more and bigger than that. Keep going. Yeah.
It absolutely is. So when interview people, they tell me three kinds of stories, essentially, with all that variety of ways that love manifests. The first one is, my leader cares about me as a person. And they talk about being, a leader taking an interest in them, being recognized for who they are, of a leader getting to know them and their interests and skills and investing in them and being able to bring their whole self to work, their authentic self to work, and not having to hide a part of themselves and not being dehumanized, about being trusted to innovate or take on new responsibilities. And people in these stories reported feeling loyal and energetic about their work and excited to go to work every day.
There you go.
What I really appreciate about those descriptions that people provided is that, well, one, it's super doable, right? Each of those are within our choicefulness and power as an individual leader to decide that that's how we're going to be with our people. It's not about, budget being delegated to some program or getting permission from someone to, this is just how we are going to be with each other. So that's
cheap, what you're alluding to. I'll put it in my verbiage. It's cheap, cost effective, aka cost effective.
Yeah. And, it may take structure to implement in terms of I might need ticklers on my calendar to make sure, or a checklist to make sure I'm checking in with all my team members. And I might need to, depending on the size of my team, I might need to keep track of
there's apps now. Sorry to interject. There's apps now I'm hearing that, I forget, one of my organizations I work with that are specifically for team engagement and touch points, which speaks to what you're talking about. Sorry to interject. Yeah.
There are tools that we can use to help us to live into this, in the ways that we would intend. So, but leaders have a powerful role to play and a huge impact that they can have. The second love story that people tell me is, my team is like a family. And that's a really common metaphor that many people hearken to. And what they're really trying to say is that, I'm appreciated, or I'm accepted, and I belong. But that metaphor doesn't work for everyone, so we have to be careful with it. It's not we shouldn't ban it, but we need to be thoughtful about it and check in and make sure that it's working for everybody. And if not, talk about it slightly differently so that we're being loving in the use of our language,
I'm thinking about the TV show The Office and Michael Scott, the character Steve Carell. That's literally, and I'm thinking about some of the disdain some of the characters have, that I don't want to be a family. This is my job. I want to go home. And I think Stanley was one of those.
Right. Right. Yeah, so we're all going to have preferences into how we live into this, and not everybody's going to want to have this look the same way.
The B word, belonging, seems to be better than the family. I like that, because what the energy of family archetypally means, inclusionary. Everybody belongs. So I think that's what they really mean when you say that. That's what I hear.
Exactly. So yeah, some people want to keep family and language and team language separate. Some people come from backgrounds where families have been harmful, and invoking family isn't invoking something positive.
That's a good point too.
Careful.
That's actually another good point.
And so, but teams that have this sense of belonging and acceptance, are super effective. They generally talk about working hard and laughing together every day, and rallying when times are hard, and coming to really great solutions and delivering great service. and being able to have healthy conflict and get to better solutions because they know that it's okay to disagree and they're not going to be voted off the island. Again, back to the psychological safety that Amy Edmondson, talks about and has researched and teaches about so brilliantly, that it's okay to take the interpersonal risk to disagree because I know that I'm safe on this team, right? So that's the team element. And then the final element, the third kind of story is I received support in a personal crisis. So the opposite of that fear story. So there's very particular experiences that people have when they face personal hardship in their team and their organization, their leader is there for them. That is profound, that those experiences are profound for people and create an incredible sense of loyalty and really truly change people's lives. So if we are able, part of this is being able to have again, back to the emotional muscle to hold space for people in their truth. And that can be in their joy, in their worry, in their triumph, in their mistakes, in the crisis that they might be experiencing. If we can be with people in those things, it builds a strong sense of trust. And that trust is really the foundation for everything that we need to do.
It's interesting because for me, what I see as you keep unpacking this more and more, it's like when we enter the workspace, it's almost unrealistic to expect like, okay, you're walking through a filter and every part of your humanity is stripped from you. And as you talk more and more, I keep hearing, Shakespeare in the Bard's classic, if you prick me, do I not bleed, right? Mm-hmm. To be human. I mean, we are all innately human and we cannot negate any longer these human conditions, these, let's say, human aspects of our beingness. And I love how you're bringing out essentially the converse of fear seems to be somebody, a leader or an environment that uplifts in a way that addresses the nervous system response, right? Because all the fear patterns, the success metrics change, betrayed, or integrity breaches, public shaming, not supported harassment, those are all almost like you push somebody and there's no parachute, right? So they've left almost hanging, to use a colloquialization of my generation, versus on the converse, it seems like love is everything that you described, is the leader being there as the proverbial parachute, not a crutch. It's more of them noticing, oh, I care about you as a person. Oh, there's belonging, or holy cow, you're going through XYZ hailstorm. What can I do to support you? They're not left hanging. I mean, it's what you, in other words, I'm shocked that we're not doing what your research has shown, because it almost seems like we're wired to do this. So then I guess as I'm blurting this out, why aren't we doing this, Renee? What after doing this research, I don't know if you had this epiphany as I'm having it live. Why aren't we doing? Because this is like almost like,
yeah, the question that I ask is, why on earth are we making it hard on ourselves?
It's so complex.
What we're trying to achieve. Like we have really hard problems to solve in this society, and across the planet. We've got planetary, we've got global problems, we've got climate problems, a crisis, we have, we can name the kinds of problems that we have, and joyful opportunities to do good in the world in all kinds of different ways. So there's problems to solve and good things to be done to create, we could explore all of that. We have all this to do. Why on earth would we be triggering a threat and fear response and making it so much harder on ourselves? There's no good logic, except that we don't really understand that that's what we're doing, and we haven't built the muscle.
An awareness thing. So, that's how I see it. It's nobody knows. Yeah. It's like there's no, everybody's on autopilot almost, is the lack of a better description. And it's like, wait, what? I mean, I don't know if the three responses that you get, I would say they pretty much, if I were to encapsulate them in a colloquial, sarcastic, it'd be like, oh, what? It's like one of those cartoons where their head shakes and they see birds, because it's, well, yeah, it's like, wait, I didn't know that was an option, whether it be the, the what, the skepticism. Well, that's a new information stream, a new data set that tells us that the cognition is like, wait, I never considered that. Confusion, same data set. And then a yes is, wait, what? We can do that? I never in my wildest dreams thought. It's like a bunch of thirsty people, and here you are bringing the water all of a sudden. Everybody's parched. Love, oh yes, that's great. So it seems to me like, yeah, it's like natural. What have we, how have we veered so far off course, so to speak?
Yeah, well, and I guess what I would offer, like, I think there's one other question that people have that is a fair question,
Mm,
which is, okay, like oftentimes we get to this point, and I've explained, we looked at what fear does in us, we understand that, we understood the fear stories and the negative impacts, and that doesn't get us what we want, and people can identify with that. We look at what love is and what I really mean by love, and the place that love has in every part of our lives, and then how love can manifest and work in all the kinds of ways that we want. No one has said, oh no, I don't want to be cared for as a person by my leader. Nah, no, I don't want to belong and be accepted on my team. Nah, forget that.
pay me. That's all I care about. Money.
I want people to be indifferent to me in my work and when I'm in a tough time. Come on. No, of course not. We all want those things. And if we just were to just bring those three things, those three experiences to our organizations and teams, we would revolutionize what people are experiencing in the work and open up tremendous potential that's being held back now by the fear that people live under. And so, all of that is there. But the one question that people ask is, okay, so this sounds great, but like, won't all this love just be too soft? Isn't this just going to be too permissive? And like, what about accountability? And that's a fair question because, people have experienced like having to be the one that carries the load, or somebody being allowed to get away with behaviors.
That's
or,
unhealthy love.
not, well, it's not love.
Yeah,
Like, so let's be
exactly.
clear about that. It is not love to allow people to get away with stuff. That is not loving to the rest of the team. It's not loving to the individual. And, the classic request that we sometimes get is, we have this person who's been with the organization for 20 years, and they're a subject matter expert, but they're also kind of a bully, and they've been allowed to be sort of a jerk all these years, but now we want to hold them accountable and like give them feedback and get them back on track. Can you help us do that? And it's like, oh my God, please do not wait 20 years to give someone feedback that their behavior is unacceptable. That is cruel to that person. That is just wrong.
I'm reminded of two things because I didn't know this about you, and we're touching on it because I wrote down in my notes healthy conflict, because I didn't know your work took you in the direction of alternative dispute resolution, which is one of the avenues of what I did in my master's. So real quick, because I want to kind of bring that into it here, because as I hear you, the two things that come to mind. One is I'm reminded of personal learnings I've had about romantic love and how society is even there we're wrong about what love really is. And I'm reminded of this master, like, we never hear in the spiritual community love is overdone, and you never hear anybody be a proverbial, pardon my French, hard ass, right? Because now we're in the domain of what you're talking about of, well, love isn't always like acquiescing and no responsibility, no accountability. Sometimes, and I learned this in my teachings, there's spiritual masters that, like a kung fu style, that they will actually be the iron glove encased in velvet, is the analogy I oftentimes hear. There is a sternness you can bring forward and still be loving, only we don't, because of the rom-com and all of the misunderstandings in the zeitgeist of our understanding as a consciousness, we don't think that's love. We think it's, so I love how you're bringing that out here. And secondly, I'm really fascinated at how people don't see that this can bring about healthy conflict, set the stage as you've done in your work. So it's really interesting that you're touching on these things that have so many applications. And a lot of it is we didn't know because of misunderstandings or wrong notions of this. So it's beautiful that you're unpacking this more. So what did you say? What do you say to those people then when they say?
So I would say that whether you're in a fearful environment or a loving environment, that we can have neglect and permissiveness and lenience where people get away with things, where we allow either, we don't address the bad behavior, we don't address the poor performance, we don't address the bullying, whatever, we let stuff happen. But that is not about our love, because it happens in either environment. It's really about our commitment. It's about not being committed to act. And oftentimes, especially for leaders, it's not really understanding what's happening and how those behaviors are falling on our teams, on individuals' teams, and on the people we're trying to serve. And when we really get clear about how bad behavior, poor performance, and and bullying and so on are landing on people, that raises our impetus to act, our commitment to take action. So if we, the commitment to act goes up, and if we're like highly committed to act, but in a fearful environment, I would offer that we have, we might, talk about that as accountability. We're going to hold people accountable. Oftentimes this is about sort of blaming and shaming and finding fault and holding people accountable if they don't meet the mark. We're going to watch and count and look over your shoulder and make sure you said you're going to do what you're going to do. And the thing about accountability that I like to point out is that we never use that term about anything positive, right? We don't say, did you do that awesome, thing last week? Were you accountable for that? Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Like, we don't say that. It sounds goofy. And accountability always has this tinge of fear to it.
Wow.
Now we're attached to it. Don't get me wrong. We are attached to this language as people. We want, people often say, I want to be held accountable, but we really want everybody else to be held accountable, but it is like with this,
You're absolutely right.
Toward, I thought you trusted me, but now you want to hold me accountable. Oh, I guess you don't really believe that I want to do the right thing.
This is fascinating, because what I'm seeing, as you're saying this, it's almost like the same thing with love that's misunderstood. I'm almost hearing, when you say accountability, that the people actually mean punishment in a lot for a lot, or for a lot. It's almost, it goes back to unhealthy upbringings as a society, because people are rule-based and they are punitive because we have such a punitive society.
Right. Yes. And so
Wow.
on the other side of the 2x2, if you will, because you can picture, low commitment, fear and love environment, high commitment, fear and love environment, right? So if accountability is high commitment to act in a fearful environment, on the other side of the 2x2, high commitment in a loving environment is about responsibility, right? It's about, our mutual responsibility to each other in an environment of trust and care and commitment to each other and to the work that we're doing. I don't want to let you down, right? I'm committed, you're committed. And that doesn't mean that we won't make mistakes, but when we do, we can be held responsible. And when we, do the awesome thing, make the great contribution, then we're responsible for that as well. And we use that language of responsibility much more flexibly.
I was going to say, it sounds like when you're speaking to love, we're really speaking to responsibility, and we're speaking to fear, we're really speaking to accountability.
That's exactly it.
It sounds like, I heard you correctly. Okay. Because I'm like, that's what my brain is extrapolating. Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you a link that we can put in the show notes if you like. I've written about this, and we have a diagram that, right now we're having it pictured in our minds, but yeah, we can.
Yeah. If you're visual like me, I'll put all of the description and some of the links to some of the research points and diagrams and things of that nature. So real quick, before we kind of come to this home stretch, you did talk, as I alluded to, you did blow my mind in terms of, oh, wow, you've done alternative dispute resolution applications of this work. So what does that look like in terms of this application of this work, whether it be dispute resolution, in terms of bring us home to this notion of, okay, practical applications of this theory and this research, whether it be dispute resolution or others, how have you applied it, and how can leaders apply it, so to speak?
Yeah. So I'll speak about that in a couple different ways, and then hone in on the dispute resolution piece. So at a high level, we see that there's these two parts, if you will, that need to be held at the same time.
Okay.
That as leaders and team members, there's sort of two parts to manifesting love. One is that we need to bring love into the moments that matter for us as people. And I talked about this already a little bit. All of the, all the things that happen. I did a great job. I had a big success. I'm like trying to learn and grow. I made a huge mistake. I made a small mistake. You can name all the myriad things that happen. We come in and work each day. Like there's whatever, all of these moments along the way in our work lives, and we need to be able to meet each other in those moments that matter, and create and build trust and relationship in those moments. And so that is about building our, capacity as people to meet each other and to accompany each other. And then in complement to that, and this is really first on leaders, but I think it's on, it's also a part of important for team members too. And I want to pause here too. You're frozen. I want to make sure that you've got
it's
me.
okay. Let's give it a second. There we go. Am I back?
There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
go.
There we go. All righty. Thanks so much. So in complement to the moments that matter is bringing love and embedding love in the structures of our organization, in the formal components, if you will. In the, in OD speak, it's in the organization design. So how does love show up in our processes, in our policies, in our communication, in the way that we meet, in the, our cultural practices? How does love show up? And we need to systematically attend to that over time as leaders and as team members too. We all kind of contribute to that. But I would say that it is a leader's responsibility to be making sure that if we're going to say we're about love, and if we're going to say we're about centering people and the other values that we hold as well that express that, whatever language that we use, respect, trust, kindness, compassion, courage, appreciation, and so on, excellence, that we are, systematically making sure that love is manifest in each of those organizational practices and structures. And you can't just have meeting you in the moments that matter in a loving way, but have, those structures be dehumanizing.
Right.
And conversely, we can't have like really great structures, but people, leaders and teams who aren't able to meet each other as humans.
No application.
So we've got to have both. So that, essentially that's the work that we do, is to help teams and leaders figure out what that means for them. And everybody has a different place to begin. We have a way that we assess that and evaluate that and help people to decide where they want to start and then where they go next and where they go next. And it is a never ending process, just as tending to those components of our organization. And
what does that look like in terms of the range of let's say where leaders start, real quick to round it out? What is the spectrum of how that looks? So let's say starting with this end, whatever this end is, to this end, what is the spectrum of the work?
A circle. Yeah. So there are structural pieces on the top and kind of cultural and behavioral pieces on the bottom. We've got 10 different components, everything from how we plan. Are we being respectful and hearing all voices in the way that we plan? Do we honor, the contribution of every team member into our strategic planning and business planning process?
Interesting.
On the policy side, it might be, what are our policies in terms of holidays? Do we respect the fact that not everyone celebrates the same holidays? And do we honor and make room for that? Or when it's time to, hold meetings in the fall, I'll use this example. Are we mindful that our Jewish colleagues have 2 significant holidays in the fall? And do we avoid scheduling things on those holidays? And, we could, play that across the spectrum of beliefs and practices, but are we careful about that? And do we have a way that we've codified that we make sure that we, respect and uphold? So, like I said, it's 10 parts to the model, and we take people through that.
And it sounds like as you're approaching it, it's so holistic that it's going to account for the gaps that you would see in culture. I'm sure you've run into this, is like they put all this fancy stuff into the OD, into the process, the systems, the mission statement, and then it's never applied, which it sounds like the moments and that it comes together. It's both the interaction and the design.
Definitely. And yeah, so there's there's statements that we work through and levels of coming in and observing, and different ways that we can, and levels of assessment and whatnot to really discover. I think the word discovery is better, but to help people have a handle on where should we begin, and how to feel happy about, okay, like we're doing well here, and okay, this is the place we can begin, and move and expand over time. So I would love to share a little bit and explore with you. I know our time is getting close, but
yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into.
I would love to talk about
practice some of this, apply some of this, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and just briefly, I'm thinking about the work we can do. 2 things on my heart.
Yeah.
One is to mention the application of this work with school districts.
Yeah.
And then the other is to offer a tool that.
Let's do it.
Okay, so just one really surprising, exciting manifestation of what this looks like in practice has come in working with a couple different school districts, who in each of them, in one case, it was a superintendent of the school district who reached out and said, I want to do team building with our district leaders and the teachers union leaders.
Okay.
in anticipation of being in contract negotiations at the end of the year. And we want to get through that more positively and not do harm to each other.
Mm.
And in the other case, it was a teachers union president reaching out and saying, I heard that about this work. We need to do that work with our district. Can you work with us? And so each, different sides of the table, if you will, instigating. And in both cases, spent a year each month building relationships between the two parties, bringing them together to just get to know each other as people. And for one of them, there was some conversation about this experience that they were going to have, and building some skill and making some decisions, not about the negotiation itself, but about the context for the negotiation. Because pretty universally, those experiences were wretched. They were committed that they were important on all sides, but they were terrible experien's. Strikes and
the whole process is
harm
fear-ridden.
done, and harm said on different sides, that was damaging, and so all this happens, and then contracts are finally reached, and before all this, and then they have to work together.
Correct.
Then each month they have to have contract meetings and solving problems, and none of the way that they were going into negotiations, the dehumanizing way that they were going into negotiations, none of that was helping them to get to good solutions and to maintain relationships so that they could do the work that they needed to do on behalf of students in the community.
Correct.
And so we brought them together, each of these groups, and the district officials with the union leaders, to just get to know each other, build relationships, so that number one, they wouldn't do harm, and number two, they actually might have a positive experience. Bingo. And in both cases, they reached positive contract outcomes in a way that both parties felt good about, and maintained relationship, and now are moving forward and working together to solve problems in their districts on an ongoing basis.
When you first told me that on our call to get on the show, and I was like, wait a second, you've done dispute resolution. Because for me, doing my master's early in, concurrent with my law degree, and I was very young, I didn't appreciate, everybody was a old timer, a lot of judges in the program, and a lot of older attorneys. And I would say that's a consciousness shift that happens in that industry, in law and dispute resolution, where they go, enough is enough. And it's like this awakening moment, and they bring all these touchy-feely things into the legal system. And what you described right there is setting the stage with goodwill, the contextual framework. And I love the word you keep bringing up, dehumanizing versus humanizing. Because I didn't mean to interject. Yeah, it's the whole system is built on fear. And so it's like, if you don't do this, we're going to walk out. And then you brought it up very astutely. Then they have to work together. The mediations process, the concept of mediation in its traditional practice in litigation in the business corporate world is the same way. It's keep them apart, and it's very laced with fear. So I love that you did that, and that, obviously it works. It's because, again, we're all human, and we keep forgetting that when you go to work, you don't magically go through a filter that takes all your human stuff away and you're a robot all of a sudden.
The one group had such a profound experience that was so radically different from their past experiences that they all absolutely, were just just struggling and anticipating how bad it was going to be. And they had such a positive experience that they decided they wanted to plant a tree.
Oh yeah, you mentioned this, yeah. And then that they took it to that extent.
And so I'm imagining them planting a forest, over the years.
Well, it's catharsis. It's a catharsis that happens, that I would say we can go into the manifestation side of this, and the quantum and the metaphysics, because I would say that is what I meant by humanity is thirsty. And then you give it to them, like, oh my God. And that is so much the work that I was doing full time, that I've transitioned and doing it in a new form or declaring it in this way, because I would say that's what I got sick and tired of, is that kind of what you were seeing in the negotiation process in unions. I was getting tired of that in the legal system, because it's like, why are we doing it this way? We could do it this way. Why are we doing it this way? So to speak.
And I think the thing I want to be clear about too is that both parties have that process is important, and the right to bargain is important, and that that wasn't in question. It was because they were dehumanizing each other, the damage that they were doing in that process made it harder to work together on behalf of, kids and families.
I love your clarification. We're disclaiming, we're not talking about any institutions, any systems, any processes. We're speaking to the human components and the manner in which the methodology, or let's say the manner in which we approach these systems and methodology.
And so that probably leads to the tool that I'd love to share as we close. I know we're coming close on time. So the tool would be this. And so I would invite those who are listening you can take out a piece of paper, open up a document, and to divide it into 4 sections.
Okay, let's do this. I'm getting my paper. 4 sections. All right.
Yeah.
I'm the guinea pig, so you all do it at home. All right.
And so at the top left of the piece of paper is to identify a challenge. Some challenge that you have, or some, opportunity. It could be a problem or an opportunity, but something that you're facing.
Okay.
And so it could be as simple as, I've got a one-on-one conversation. I've got a one-on-one conversation I need to have, or we've got a change that we're making on our team, or we're bringing new people onto our team, or, we're implementing a new software system, or whatever. It could be anything. So naming that challenge. And then on the other side on the top is making a list of all the people who are impacted by that challenge. And so in the case of, a one-on-one thing, it might be, Tom, or, it could be one person. In the case of something that's more widespread, it might be categories of people or groups of people who are impacted, but naming those people impacted. Okay.
So challenge and opportunity, the people impacted, top 2 quadrants. Okay.
Exactly. And then in the bottom 2 quadrants, on one side, on the left side, the heading would be to make a list of how you can create fear for all the people who are impacted by that challenge. So the heading would be how I can create fear.
Okay.
And then on the other side is how I can create love.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And so then the exercise is to spend some time and to think through, in terms of these people and this challenge, what are the things that I can do as a leader or a team member, as someone involved in this, that would make this a scary experience for those people? What would make them feel disenfranchised? What would make them feel anxious? What would make them feel disrespected? What would make them feel, not included, or, that I'm indifferent to them? Okay. And make a list. And then on the other side, make a list of the things that I can do to create a sense of love, a sense of respect, trust, compassion, kindness, appreciation, inclusion, belonging. Make that list. And what I have discovered is that, for one, we can make these lists. We know. We have a pretty clear sense of the kinds of things that we do that are actually creating fear and that can create love. And if we have question, we can get counsel. We can ask colleagues, what do you think? And we can also ask those who are impacted. We can say, we're getting ready to do this thing. We're getting ready to embark on this challenge or face this new thing. I want to be sure that we don't create fear, and I want to make sure that we create an environment where you are loved and cared about. Let's make the list of the ways that we can behave as a leader can behave, we as an organization can behave, we can behave as a team that would create fear. What are those things? Like, let's be explicit with ourselves. And then what can we do to create love? And make those 2 lists. And then we have our marching orders, right? Now we know, don't do the one, and be working not to manifest those fear behaviors, and then put the love list into action.
What's interesting about this is I wouldn't have considered some of the people impacted. So I like how this brings about the awareness shift, expands it. So you kind of take a step back into a more, let's say, objective observer seat. And then some of the things that I wrote in the fear department are very, you would think you wouldn't do them. Only mine was a partnership dispute. I was given what we were talking about in legal, and I used like a remembrance of a very high stakes lawsuit that I was involved in. And it was funny because I would say instinctively the system is designed in a way to optimize all the fear stuff. And then at least in law,
Sure.
the love column is the stuff that I would always do as a practitioner that would get scoffed at or would create the wait, what moments, let's say, because there are things of bringing people together, listening, not necessarily filing more motions, kind of curtailing that, which again, it runs contrary, let's say, to some of the cultures of certain ecosystems, certain industries, and then the way that the systems are built. They almost discourage, let's say,
Right.
or encourage dehumanization. Let's put it
Right.
that way.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And so I think the other thing that I would offer, another activity that with someone doing this exercise, think it through, make the list. And then I would say, get yourself grounded and do a heart meditation.
You said the M word?
Meditation. And so here's what that would look like. Like you have used your intellect to fill out this template, right? And now we need to tap into that intuition and that heart connection. And that, just to get oneself grounded and present and to sense and feel your heart. And then to close your eyes and in your mind's eye, to picture the people that are on that list, to picture the people impacted. And then to invite those people to thank you. I love you too. And then to invite those people to step forward, someone as sort of a representative to step forward and to look at them and to let yourself sense and feel what they might be sensing and feeling and longing for. Like, let yourself tap into that kind of knowing. And what I've discovered is that when we do that secondary part to this exercise, then you turn back to the sheet and you have more to add.
Oh, yeah.
You likely have realized some things, right?
This was one of the first mediations that I handled, not as a mediator. One of my first cases, right when I got licensed in 2008. And it was a very contentious partnership dissolution. And I mapped it out, what you're talking about. And then I meditated. It all happened on its own, sua sponte, as they say in Latin in law, on its own accord. And I was like, so now you saying this, and obviously now I've been trained, not only in mediation before that, all these different, let's say, spiritual teachings and inner work and learning how the biophysiology relates, because your exercise, beautiful. The first part takes us into the brain and then it allows us to expand. And then the second portion, it really, we can go on and on. There's so many layers because the science is now showing we can literally exchange energies with another party. So there's a lot there in sitting, going out of the brain, meditating, as you said, doing a heart meditation, because yes, definitely more will unveil itself. You'll have even more insight, intuitive insight, extrasensory insight. And there's a lot of really powerful magic that happens because that case had gone to mediation 3 times with one of the most powerful mediators in Southern California. They could never, it was I used to get known for intractable conflict that's so entrenched. And I would say what you're espousing, if I knew back then what I was doing consciously, cogently, I would have been like, well, I'll be by Jove, I'll be Watson to your Sherlock. I'll be like, well, that's brilliant, Holmes. So it works. I'm saying all this to say that this not only works, I wish, like I said, I had this back then. So whether you're in the legal industry, dispute resolution, the government, the private sector, the public sector, this is applicable in any ecosystem.
It is, exactly. Wherever we're working with each other, with people, tapping not just into our intellectual knowing, but into all of our powers of knowing through all of our whole being is incredible. I love that. Important.
Anything to round us out? Any final words? Anything you feel inspired? Are you left out?
Goodness, I would just say, that don't be afraid of love, right?
That's an ironic statement. And it's true. You would think everybody may be listening and you may be like, wait, that's really what's happening in the world. Fear is in the way of love. And don't forget, you only have one master. You can only attune to one station. It's fear or love. So if it's fear, you're not going to step into receptivity and love. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Renee. Thank you for being here, sharing your research. More importantly, doing this work as a way shower out in the world. It's really remarkable to see the age we're in and see more Renees pop up. And thank you for being out there and doing this work. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for coming to another episode of season 4 of the Vulnerable Power Show. We hope this not only inspired you to see the practical applications that love has, to also dispel any fear of love, as Renee said, and also learn what are the elements of love? That way you can bring more heart and soul back to your leadership, back to your ecosystem, to your team, and to your workplace. Thanks for joining us, and we hope that this brought you more love and less fear. Take care for now.